I get chills just thinking about it, and the countdown, 10 seconds. And then I get the cue from our starter and we shoot the gun and off they go. And these amazing, it just never gets old. And as you guys know, we call it the golden hour, the last hour. We have a 13-hour time limit. And it's unbelievable when the elite world-class guys, when the Jim Walmsleys and the Hayden Hawks break our finish line in incredible times, just over 6 minutes a mile. But then the real story is when the sun goes back down. Race started in the dark. Gets dark again about 5:30. And the clock, you have 2 more hours in the darkness. And those people who come in those last 2 hours. And the crowd go crazy. The crowd at the finish line gets larger and larger as you get closer to the 13 hours. And we give them updates out there in the course. When the last participant goes through 4 miles and they roughly have to be within an hour of the finish line. And people gather in there and stomp their feet and clap like crazy to bring in those incredible people who start in the dark and then finish in the dark. Are they the world-class athletes, the genetic freaks in the race, the people that won the genetic lottery? No. But are they the type of people that you just can't imagine the mental toughness and fortitude of these people?
Welcome to the RUNEGADE Podcast. RUNEGADE is what happens when two ordinary friends dare to practice the lost art of conversation to better understand what it means to be a runner and a human. Should we follow convention and play by the rules? Or would it be better to trust our guts? Each episode, you'll learn from the experts, the underdogs, the elites and adventurers, those doers of big things, all in the quest of being just a little bit better tomorrow. In a world of runners, be a renegade. So you're running a marathon or the JFK 50 mile. Pop yourself an athletic brew and have yourself a smile.
I like that one. I was going to say, just as a secondary plug, if you're running the JFK, make sure you sip on a Walker Haze. That didn't really transition into there's an athletic brew for you. But anyway, we're fancy. We're fancy tonight.
There's always an athletic brew for you. So, Mark, tonight we have Mike Spinnler. He is the race director of the JFK 50 mile race. And you know what? This guy has a really interesting backstory, almost like a love story with the JFK 50. And we're going to get into it tonight for sure. He first ran the JFK when he was 12 years old.
They didn't even have seatbelts. They didn't have seatbelts back then either, right? So anything flew. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, anything goes. Anything goes in the trails. We know that. And so he ran it from 1971 to 1990. He won the race straight out in 1982 and 1983. And he actually was the course record holder from 1982 to 1994. I got all these stats written down here. And most significantly, he's been the race director since 1993. So here is a gentleman who's been involved with this race, a love story with the race since 1971, and it's 2024. Quick, get our calculators out. That's more than we can do math in our minds. This is unbelievable.
Amazing. That is amazing.
This year's JFK 50 mile race is going to be held on Saturday, November 23rd. It's presented by our friends, Ultra. Yeah, Ultra Running. Ooh. A great race. And Mike, we're going to get all the details like we do with all the race directors. I'll try to get the secrets. So help me finish the course a little bit faster. It's fantastic. It's like, to me, it's like 4 different races in one. You got this first 3 miles outside of Boonesboro, Maryland, till you get to the start of this Appalachian Trail. And you got to go up this nice incline. It's like a road all the way, a fire road up to the top of the Appalachian Trail. Then you got about, I would say, I wrote it down here, 13 miles on the Appalachian Trail. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous single track. Then you come off. You run 26.3 miles on the C&O Canal. It's beautiful. It's flat. It's crushed stone. There's great crowd support. The aid stations. Oh, the aid stations. Unbelievable. There's a cookie at like aid station mile 17 or 18.
Yeah.
I don't know. This cookie is fantastic. Then the last 8 miles is on some rolling roads into the high school where you finish. So you get all these different vibes. The people are amazing. The crowd support's amazing. The race is amazing. I kind of fell in love with it myself. That's why I'm going back this November.
It sounds like you also have a love story with this race as well. So perhaps from 2025 till 2050, you could be the race director for it too as well. At some point, you never know.
Well,
Salute you. Thank you so much for submitting your application for it and being willing to come out and support our first run that will happen at some point, but it wasn't the year this year.
it will happen. It will happen. And we refunded the money. That was good. Like we got the money back. But one person actually said, "Oh, it's a donation. I love your podcast." And that was interesting.
Whoa,
so that was our first sponsor. Our first sponsor
Maybe
was
our next episode
someone who
we'll
came
have
to the
give
Desk
them
and Dirty race.
a real shout out. But you know who you are if you're listening to this right now, and we salute you and thank
That's
you.
right.
Thank you so much.
He does. That's right. And you know what, Mark? We're growing our YouTube audience. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to see us in 180p, 720p, whatever you want, 480, whatever you want,
Ooh.
a lot of P, subscribe. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We got 40 YouTube followers, and we're trying to grow that. If you get to 100, that'd be amazing. So just subscribe to us. You can, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, like, share, comment. We love all the feedback because that feedback and those likes helps us grow the audience. And it actually shows the people we try to bring on the show that we're actually a legit show, but we're not a legit show. So once they come on, they know that show. We want to call out to our unofficial sponsor, a friend of the podcast, Path Projects. We love Path Projects. And I've been wearing the Wadi collection all summer. I got the tanks. I got the t-shirt. I'm going to be ordering some more. They got the Billy Yang new Wadi hoodie. The Wadi collection, what I like about it, it's lightweight. It's got UV protection. It's all coming from this Toray material from Japan. And it's called Field Sensor Biocan, Mark.
It's probably not Biocan because it probably gets rid of the BO.
It does. We talked about that last episode. And really that fabric moves the perspiration away from your body to help you keep cool. And it's kept me cool all summer. It's actually perfect for this time of year. It's like 55 degrees out this evening. Beautiful out to be running in the Wadi collection. And it's good for the sun too. So we thank Path Projects for being a friend of the podcast. And you can use the code RUNEGADE10 for 10% off your order. Mike, thanks for joining us here on the Renegade. We've had Dr. Mark Cucuzzella on a couple times, and we've talked about the JFK, and he mentioned that you two go back a ways.
We go way back. We've been friends for a long, long time. Amazing guy, amazing runner, amazing race director, just a great ambassador for the sport. Mark Cucuzzella is just 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, absolutely. We love him. He's our go-to for almost anything running and training. We love Dr. Mark. And you know what? And thanks for joining us. So we've been at the show for about 17 episodes. You're the 17th guest, 18 if you count Don and Scott. That's what Mark always says. We had the Trail Runner Nation guys on.
Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to meet you guys.
Thanks. For our listeners, we have a really special guest. We have the race director for the JFK 50-mile race, Mike Spinnler. And Mike, you have an amazing, what Mark and I were talking about, a love story with the JFK 50, going back many years. Maybe you can share with our audience the start of your JFK love story.
Well, it goes back 54 years, actually. And how I was introduced to the event, my older brother I'm the youngest of 7 siblings, and my oldest brother, who's the oldest of the 7 siblings, was an outstanding college runner for Catawba College down in North Carolina. And he continued to run after college, and he was in the early part of adventure sports. And he came to visit us. He lived in Southern California, and my family lived in Maryland, in Frederick, Maryland, maybe 18 miles away from the start in Boonesboro. And we weren't familiar with the event. He showed up, and he had a Sports Illustrated magazine with him that had a little blurb in it about Baxter Berryhill, who had won the event in 1970 and breaking the record at 7 hours and 25 minutes. And we were flabbergasted. How could a human being cover 50 miles on foot in 7 hours and 25 minutes? Well, he showed up, and he was going to do the event. And he set up training camp, and he was 30 years old. He was like a perfect age for endurance athletics. And he kind of educated us on the event. We watched him train for 6 weeks. And one day he left the entry form and the information packet on the kitchen table, and I was reading through it. And there was no minimum age at that time. And if you were under the age of 18, if you had a parent or guardian sign a permission slip and you paid the entry fee, you could participate. So I talked to my dad about, me doing it. I was 12 years old. I was in the 7th grade. And I really had no intentions of going the whole way. Back at that time, if you went the Appalachian Trail section, the first 15.5 miles, you got a certificate, a frameable certificate. And if you made it to the 35-mile point, they gave you this beautiful gold medal with the Kennedy profile on it. And if you actually finished the race, you got this beautiful marble-based trophy. So I was thinking, I'm 12 and a half years old. If I can make that 15.5 miles, I get one of those certificates. So my parents agreed to let me sign up. And my brother Bill was there as an elite athlete trying to win the event. And so we all got started together on April 3rd, 1971. It was the first time I ever pinned a number on. And my father, who had not been a long distance runner, he was a standout athlete, but a baseball, football, basketball, tennis guy. So we didn't know what to do with the number. When we picked up when we picked our number up, we were like, what do we do with this? And so we saw the other participants grabbing some safety pins and pinning it on. So my dad pinned the number on me, and Buzz Sawyer shoots the gun, and off we went. A 15-hour time limit, 589 starters. And what my dad didn't realize is the gap between me and my brother. And actually, 2 of my other brothers entered as well. So there was 4 of the Spinnler boys who entered. One, Bill, who was 30, my brother Jack, who was a college freshman, who was 19, and then my brother Donald, who was in the 10th grade, who was 16, and then me, I was 12. So my dad had no idea that he was not going to be able to take care of 4 of us because of the gaps that were going to open up. So when I got to the 15.5-mile point, looking for my father's Volkswagen camper, it was nowhere to be found. But people were continuing, and I didn't really feel that bad, And so I just went ahead and continued thinking, when I see my dad along the way, I'll climb in the Volkswagen camper. I've got my certificate in hand. And as the day went on, before I knew it, I'm at the 35-mile aid station, and I'm like thrilled. I'm going to get a certificate and a medal with the Kennedy profile on it. And I look, and when you dropped out back then, they called it retiring. You took off your number and you handed it over to one of the race officials so they could mark off that you had retired from the event, and they could keep track of who was still out in the course. And then you waited for a bus to come pick you up and bring you back either to the finish line or back to the start line. And I looked at the people assembled there waiting to get picked up. And I see my 16-year-old brother sitting there. And I had never beaten him at anything. I couldn't beat him at chess, checkers, any physical game. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, if I finish this event, then I actually beat him at something. So, and I actually, before I saw him, I had 2 or 3 pins already off, ready to hand over my note. But when I saw him, I pinned the number back on. And I went over and kind of razz him a little bit, like, say, what's going on? He says, I can't bend my legs anymore. I'm done. And of course, sibling rivalry, we had a couple words, and I said some things to him I probably shouldn't say in a podcast. And he got up and tried to chase me. But luckily, his legs were more sore than mine. But I get another 50 yards down the towpath, and I'm going, well, I got to keep going now. So I kept going, and it gets dark. And, we had a 15-hour time limit. So Buzz started the race at 7 a.m. You had till 10 p.m. So I probably have about 4 miles to go. And it's dark. And I'm just moving forward like the other people around me. It was 151 finishers of that 589 starters. And I'm in that last 30, 40, 50 people. And we're kind of helping each other, making friendships and just keep moving forward. And all of a sudden I see my father's Volkswagen camper pull up. I think it was a 1968 version. And he looks at me and he's like, he can't believe that his 12-year-old son has gone 46 miles and is still moving. And in the back seat laying in the back of the camper is my brother Bill. And I found out at that point he'd gone 48 and a half miles, had fallen steadily from the leaders back and farther. And he leaned up against the camper to catch his breath at 48 and a half miles. Hypoglycemic, this was the early days, not knowing how to fuel yourself. And he passed out. So they put him in the camper. They brought him to the local hospital. Once he got some fluids back in him, he was okay, and they released him. So then my father comes out, and he's looking for the rest of us. My one brother, Don, my 10th grade brother, who had been already shuttled back to the finish line, and my brother Jack had finished maybe a half hour or so in front of me. And there's my father. He gets out, and he has my brother Jack, who had finished, and let him drive the Volkswagen camper. My father walked the last 4 miles in with me. And I finished in 14 hours, 19 minutes, and 23 seconds. I was 129th place. And in my father's mind, I was the greatest athlete who ever lived. He was so proud of me. So that was my introduction. It was almost like, how things happen. It was almost just like the cosmic tumblers of the universe falling in place. And in our family, when we went to church on Sunday mornings, that was a house rule. And there was no excuse. I mean, I was really sore the next morning getting down the step. Went off to church, and they were at church. And I remember we were standing in front of the Presbyterian Church in downtown Frederick, Maryland. My father was bragging about me finishing the event, and anybody would listen. And I march in there, and people were slapping me on the back. I'm 12 years old. I'm probably 2 years still away from puberty, and I just started dreaming big. And I remember later that day, I told my dad, because my brother Bill had come to win the event for the family, and I told him, I said, someday I'm going to win this race for the family. It was a 12-year-old kid that finished over 8 hours behind the winner that had no idea what he was talking about. Mm-hmm. But, fast forward 12 years and I became a pretty good high school runner, a better college runner. And then once I got out of college, I ran 2:28 at Boston in the Duel in the Sun. And the farther I went, the better I got. I fell into a training group of world-class runners and a guy named Greg Shank, who was probably one of the best coaches on the planet. And once again, all the cosmic tumblers fell into place. And there I was. I remember knocking on my father's door the morning of that 1982 race. And I was over 40,000 miles in training at that point. And I really felt very confident that I had a chance to win. And I told my dad, and I didn't really tell him specifics. I said, just make sure you're at the finish line today. And he knew what I was saying, that today I was going to try to fulfill the prophecy of winning the race for the family. And 5 hours, 53 minutes, and 5 seconds later, I broke the course record that was held by the legendary Max White by 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And there I was holding the Champions Cup. And, the local boy beat the guys from Colorado and all over the United States and won. And Buzz Sawyer, the race director at that time, just absolutely, me and him developed like a father-son relationship. He actually coached my coach. And a year later, we already discussed, by the time I was 25 years old, we were already discussing that I was going to take over as the race director when the time was right. And early 90s, Buzz was in his 60s. And Buzz decided, are you ready to go? And I said, he had a health scare. We thought he had prostate cancer in the late 1980s. And he was like, are you ready to go? And I'm like, well, I promised you I'd take over when the time was right, whether I was, 27 or 37. So finally, he beat that, and he survived. And when we decided that the 30th annual 1992, that would be his last event. Baltimore Sun was there to interview him, and we had a ceremonial passing of the torch. And I'd become the new race director. So 1993, me and my lovely bride, Maria, we actually got married on June the 9th. I better get the date right. June the 9th.
You better.
And then that November, we put the JFK on together, and we've been directing it now this is our 32nd year. It's like, you blink your eyes. We started directing this thing when we were newlyweds. Our sons are 28 and 26 years old now. And here we are, and she's doing the event. She finished the event last year, 61 years of age. It's like, I can't speak for her, but really about the only time I feel old is when I walk by a mirror, So, but we have a great staff. We have this amazing staff of participants that have done the event, fallen in love with the event. And our operations manager hasn't done the event per se, but he's been helping at aid stations since he was a high school runner. And now he's 44 years old and really kind of runs the show on race day. But we've got people on our race management team in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, all ready to carry the ball in case something happens to me and Maria. You know, we when we have our organizational meetings, kind of a rah-rah thing we always talk about November of 2062. And if everything goes well, that will be the 100th annual JFK. And so we're planning out this year, the 62nd, but we're also looking ahead to the 100th in November of 2062. And, you know, based on the actuary tables, me and Maria probably won't be here watching. We'll be watching from heaven, but we feel very, very good, like Buzz did. You know, Buzz felt very, very strongly that I would carry the race into the 50th year. When I took over after 30, it was like, will the JFK make 50? And I feel very, very confident with this group of passionate people that are helping us that we will see that race in 2062. And hopefully a bunch of Canadians are coming down to test the water still.
Maybe that'll be Mark's first race. Come on, Mark, you got like 40 more years to train. What a story, though, Mike. Like, what a story. My hair was standing up on my arms because it's so, like you talked about the cosmic tumblers falling into place. Like maybe that was the early indication that you said that I want to win this race for the family. And you willed it into existence, and you actually did. Like, how did that feel? Like, how did that feel for all those years of training, and then you go and run 5:58? And this is a tough course. It's a fun course, but it's a tough course. Well, let me tell you,
I kept meticulous records. I'm a coach, and I've been coaching since the late 1970s. I was coaching while I was still an athlete, and then I gravitated into strictly coaching. But I kept meticulous logs, and every once in a while I go back. And at that point in my life, I wasn't married, and I had no children, but I clearly wrote in capital letters, the most satisfying day of my life. That everything fell into place, that everything my coach and me talked about, that, you know, that no one on that starting line besides Greg Shank, God rest his soul, he passed away in 2018, and me, believed that I was going to win that race. But he did, and I did, but it was execution. Everything had to be done properly. The nutrition, the execution of when was I going to go into lead? When was I going to start pushing? And I can just see it. All he talked about, and it was a tree. It's no longer there. It was 6 miles ago. There was a big tree on the course, and he talked about it. He says, "And we're not going to start really hard until 6 miles ago." And we got to that tree. I was feeling great in the rhythm, and there's a video. It's on YouTube, and I just was feeling it. I was floating on the ground. And at that point, you know, I didn't have the win guarantee, but at that point, he said, "Cut loose and go for the record." And as the legend, he says, when I got to the big ugly tree, you know, I was kind of tall for a runner. He says, "Okay, you big ugly guy, make your big ugly move at the big ugly tree." And off I took. And that's when Buzz Sawyer, who was in the lead vehicle, started yelling to me my proximity to the record. And the record at that point had stood for almost a decade. Max White was the U.S. champion at 50 miles. He was second in the London to Brighton 50 miler, which at that time was the unofficial world championship. And anybody who talked about beating this record, it was blasphemy. There was a reason that no one came with a mile of that record. And all of a sudden, there I was. And it was just magical. Now, my marriage day and the birth of my two sons outshine that day. But it's probably number 4 that my dad was there to see that. And, you know, he passed away a couple years later, but I'm so glad that he lived to see the family prophecy come true. And my brother in California, he still brags about it, you know, that he was the one that motivated. He was the one that instilled that dream in my mind. It's the truth. I mean, if he'd have picked water skiing or I don't know, pickleball, whatever it was, instead of running the JFK, my life could have been totally different.
But you'd be an amazing pickleball. Just kidding.
I sometimes wish it had been pickleball.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. I love this event. And, you know, as the director of it, it never gets old. I mean, yeah, you have your stresses like any race director, you know, the little things you worry about and so forth. But when they line up in downtown Boonesboro and it's dark and it's 6:30 in the morning and you got 1,000+ people with 1,000+ great stories, great motivations for being there, man, I get chills just thinking about it, you know, and the countdown, 10 seconds. And then I get the cue from our starter and we shoot the gun and off they go. And these amazing, it just never gets old. And as you guys know, we call it the golden hour. the last hour, we have a 13-hour time limit. And it's unbelievable when the elite world-class guys, when the Jim Walmsleys and the Hayden Hawks break our finish line in incredible times, just over 6 minutes a mile. But then the real story is when the sun goes back down. Race started in the dark. Gets dark again about 5:30. And the clock, you have 2 more hours in the darkness. And those people who come in those last 2 hours. And the crowd go crazy. The crowd at the finish line gets larger and larger as you get closer to the 13 hours. And we give them updates out there in the course. You know, when the last participant goes through 4 miles and they roughly have to be within an hour of the finish line. And people gather in there and stomp their feet and clap like crazy to bring in those incredible people who start in the dark and then finish in the dark. Are they the world-class athletes, the genetic freaks in the race, the people that won the genetic lottery? No. But are they the type of people that you just can't imagine the mental toughness and fortitude of these people? You know, women. Last year we had 3 women over 60 finish in the last half hour, you know, and just amazing. And my wife was one of them. And I mean, I was moved to tears, you know, when I saw them, like, easy Pete. She was a world-class runner, you know, back in the 80s and early 90s. And here she is decades later and lacing up the shoes and, man, and probably hurting now worse at 60 couple than she was at 30 couple, you know? But it's, as you can tell, I'm passionate about the event. Absolutely. I mean, I coach athletes that train for it. I got a 23-year-old guy he's read my training book, and he was a 424 miler in high school. He's got leg speed. He's read my book. And I mean, literally read my book, my training book. And I let him look at it. I said, don't lose it, because this is important, Jimmy. You know, I was coaching him this morning, and we're 80 days out. And I'm saying, Trent, you know, 80 days out, you're in a great place. Let's stay healthy, get there right, you know, have that plan together. And I kind of like put myself in Greg Shank's spot when Greg Shank was doing the same thing with me. You know, 98% fit is better than 100, and on the start line, it's better than 100% fit and hurt. You know, that edge you want to get to. And it's just so exciting. You know, the people that I coach and the people who have put the event on and the local, even the hotel people, how they take such great pride and make sure everything is perfect for the experience that these people who come in literally from around the world, you know, for this event. It's really exciting. And local tourism, they jump all over it. Now, of course, you know, they love it because it's a lucrative weekend. A lot of people come in and spend money in hotels and restaurants and that type of thing. But they've got the same passion for it. They want everything to be just precise. For those 2 people, Eric Sensman won the event in 2017, and it was a dream of his, very similar to mine. We had a close bond because he lived for winning the JFK, and so did I. I mean, it was a big lifetime athletic goal for me. And when he did it, he was so overcome by emotion in that last straightaway. And I understood it, and I hugged him. And every time I referred to him, I never call him Eric or Mr. Sensiman. I always call him the 2017 JFK 50-mile champion, and he loves it. That dream that comes true for that first man and that first woman, and then all the getting in the top 10, getting on a podium, and then those people who cross that line, and they look at that medal hanging around their neck, and we tell them, and it sounds like a fabrication, but the announcer announces all the time that less than 1% of the U.S. population has ever finished a 50-mile foot race. That's 1 out of 1,000. And it's far less than that. The U.S. population, 330-some million people. Yeah, and it's been way less than 330,000 people in the United States who have finished a 50-mile foot race. So when these people join that group, whether it's in 12 hours, 59 minutes, and 59.9 seconds, or up there in Hayden Hawks' territory at 5 hours, 18 minutes, and 40 seconds, or Ellie Greenwood. And I know the win went for Scotland, but she had a Canadian mailing address when she won the race in a course record back in 2012. And it was so appropriate. She wins the race in 2012. Do you know what her time was? 6 hours, 12 minutes, and 12 seconds.
Oh, no way.
How appropriate the year 2012, which was our 50th annual. That's when we had Teddy Roosevelt's great-grandson starting the race, and then people in the Kennedy family were there handing out awards at the finish line. It was just like, you talk about things perfect. And I know Ellie didn't try to do that because she was fighting for dear life to beat Emily Harrison that day. Emily Harrison ran the second fastest time ever running the JFK and got second place. So we really couldn't officially sing "Oh Canada" at the awards ceremony because she would as Scotland being her nationality. Yeah, but it's an amazing event. If you guys haven't been there before, we will roll out the red carpet for our Canadian friends. And we used to have this friendly rivalry back in the 80s when I was still racing, late 80s, is the Canadians would come down, and the team competition was unofficial at that point. Now it's official. But the Canadians would come down, Grant Baxter and these guys, and they would come down. Clark Zeeland, who was a super stud. Maybe that predates you guys, but man, he was a great Canadian runner. But they would take 5 Canadians, top 5 Canadian guys versus the top 5 American guys, and who would win? And the winning team, it would be a skid of beer. Do you know how much a skid of beer is? It's
Yes.
seven cases of beer, 14. It's 98 cases of beer is what it is. So we would have this competition where we were fighting. So if the Canadians won, we had to buy them a skid of Canadian beer. And if we won, it would be, and actually it was kind of funny because Bud Light came out in 1982. And the local distributor, I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't have a shoe sponsor at the time. And I was broke like most 23, 24-year-olds. And he told me, I'll pay your entry fee. And if you win the race, I'll give you $100, which is totally against the amateur rules at the time. Maybe I'll get disqualified. He said, if you win the race, I said, what's the deal? He says, you got to wear Bud Light on your chest. So in that competition, I'm wearing Bud Light. To the Canadians, we beat them that year. They had to buy us a skid of Bud Light. I don't know what that cost back in 1982, but it was probably $10 a case. Times 98. That's almost $1,000 back then. Anyway, it was fun.
Well, that's good motivation. But I think the secret is, we'll come down. I ran it last year. That was my first JFK. We'll bring the Canadian beer, to the Americans ahead of time, and the extra alcohol might impact their performance. I don't know. Mike, you gave me an idea.
Feel a little bloated before the run, yeah.
Oh my gosh! Hopefully you won't have any trouble going across the border. We used to go to a great race up in Canada, Run for the Toad. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Run for the Toad.
No.
They had their last edition in 2019. Peg and George Sarson put it on. Amazing race tractors, and they used to invite up. We used to go up, and it was so fun crossing the border and then coming back. And they used to give this incredible big trophy to the winning team. And we won it one year. And I had this cocky guy on my team, and he was typical 24 years old. And we're crossing the Canadian border coming back in the U.S. And he says, are you bringing back anything that you didn't have? And this 24-year-old holds up the trophy. He says, yeah, this big old trophy we took from your boys. When I looked, I'm going, Cam, you realize we're probably going to be stuck at the border now as they tear apart our vehicle. But luckily, the border guard had a good sense of humor, and he said, congratulations, guys, and waved us by. But we've had some fun times competing north of the border. And we just love the Canadian guys who come down. It's just it's a fun rivalry. It's not a rivalry because, as anybody who knows done the JFK, you form these bonds out there, and everybody. Now, the first couple of guys, they're fighting it out but after that, people are, come on, man, stay up. Come on, let's beat the next time. Then come on, we can get under a certain time barrier, and they work together in groups. And I just love seeing that stuff. People have formed. One of my high school buddies, who wasn't really a runner per se, but he got interested in the event because of the publicity he got. And he says, do you think I can finish it? I says, yeah, if you do the training and you do it properly. No, you're not going to do it in 6 hours, but yeah, you can probably be. And he did, and he finished the event. And he ended up doing it like 20 plus times. And his kids ended up doing it. And he developed friendships with people he met in the race. And he would meet up with them at other times of the year. Like he was a big NASCAR fan. And he'd meet up with people he met in the race, and they'd go to NASCAR races. These lifelong friendships. And I always describe to people, it's like a class reunion. It's like a big family reunion, class reunion. And they meet in downtown Boonesboro on the Saturday before our Thanksgiving every year. And it's just, it's a blast. I mean, it is a blast.
It's the
guys I
true
was coaching, I
spirit.
told them for 80 days. I'll even say to them, I says, if you asked me in 1981, 82, 83, how many days at JFK, I could tell you, like, maybe not 300 days out, but any time within 6 months out, I could tell you 179 days ago. Here's what I'm doing now, okay? So with my guys I coach, I'll say to them, Trent, how many days? 80, coach. 80 days to go. And people, I counted down like a little kid can't wait for Christmas morning, And finally, on November 23rd this year, we'll get to unwrap the presents, and I'll shoot that gun at 6:30, and we'll watch it unfold again.
unfold. Well, what you described there, and what I experienced last year, it's everything that's the great about ultra running. It's the friendships, the event, the organization. Like I was telling Mark, what I love about the JFK, it's a big ultra. It's like 1,100 entrants, but you're in downtown Boonesboro, and you're right with the lead pack. You see them in the front of the pack. You're only like 20 feet away from them. You can give them a shout of encouragement, and then you line up behind them, and you make friendships on the course. And like you said, they help you get through there. I met two folks. I can't remember their names. One was a lawyer from Chicago, and one was a doctor. And the lawyer from Chicago, I think he said he ran like 60 or 70 ultras. He's all over the North America running. And he was a little bit wobbly, like towards the center line on the rolling hills. So I'm kind of keeping him towards the edge, and I'm dragging my left leg behind me because I thought I blew out my knee. It just turned out I had the world's worst knot in my calf muscle. But I dragged it to the finish, Mike, and it was the best feeling. Like you said, you turn that last corner, you see the school, you hear the crowd, and like the emotion wells up. Like you know you're doing something big. You get your JFK medal. You head into the school. It's just a great feeling, and I can't wait. I'm signed up again. I'm going to do it this year, and all this energy that you're bringing in this podcast, you got me so excited. I got to up my training game now.
Got to watch it for those 12-year-olds, Todd.
Yeah.
Well,
my sons who were born into the race. I started directing in '93. My sons were born in '96 and '98. I mean. And they didn't know anybody else's life. They didn't think anybody else's life was any different. They thought everybody's house was full of energy bars for a couple of months a year, and all the stuff that comes into our houses. We prepare for
I
the
can
event.
just imagine like the storage room you got. Yeah.
But they really didn't have a great interest in doing the event until they became young adults. And then it was like, I need to know. Neither of them were competitive runners. Well, one was in high school until about 10th grade. Then he switched over to drama. And the other was a lacrosse player and a soccer player, but not really marathon runners per se. Neither of them run a marathon, but both of them have done the JFK because it's just the fascination of it and that temptation. Can I? And we got 14 aid stations out there, and they're mainly filled with high school cross country and track kids, some civic groups, a lot of young people out there who are incredible cheerleaders. They're cheering like crazy, but the seed gets planted in their heads because they see, especially the first time they help out, they don't really understand. What do they expect? They expect to see like the guys in the Olympics, the 210 marathon runners. All of a sudden they start seeing regular folks and not young people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And it plants a seed in their head. Maybe someday I'm going to do this. And inevitably, every year I'll get somebody, Mr. Spinnler, do you remember me? I helped out at the Boonesboro aid station back in whenever. And then they are at the finish line with a number on and a medal on their neck. And they're in their 20s now, or maybe their 30s. And that just makes me feel so good that these people kind of saw it and fell in love with it. And it was just like, they had to find out. Answer that question. Could I do this? Could I answer what was the Roosevelt challenge, the history of the event? It wasn't Kennedy. Kennedy was trying to revive the Roosevelt challenge. Roosevelt required his military officers to cover 50 miles on foot in 20 hours. And then it disappeared. And then Kennedy brought it back a half a century later. So that's why when we had the 50th annual, we had the Roosevelt family and the Kennedy family involved because it's those. So people can I do it? Can they do it? And my oldest son, who's in the military, he's in the Air Force, and he dreams of being an officer. He was like, well, Roosevelt required his military officers to cover 50 miles on foot in 20 hours, or else they were out. They lost their commission. So Willie's like, I wonder if I could do it. And a lot of military, we get a great number of military because at root, it is a military event. Not just the U.S., but military personnel from all over the world come in to see if they can do it, maintain their readiness. And if you go back to the roots of it with Roosevelt, it wasn't a foot race. It was cover 50 miles on foot in 20 hours and then be able to conduct a military operation the next day.
Oh, boy.
And that's how and then Kennedy thought out loud at a meeting with his chiefs of staff, I wonder how many of my current military officers could still fulfill this requirement. And that's how the rebirth of it started. That's how it restarted. In 62 and 63, they were on military bases all over the United States. Then Life magazine did a story on it, and then the general public wanted to do it. But unfortunately, when Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963, almost uniformly, none of the events were ever held again. They were the Kennedy challenges. And Buzz Sawyer, being the foresightedness and the athletes he was coaching, Buzz, we want to do it again in 64. And Buzz says, we'll hold it again. We'll just change the name from the Kennedy Challenge to the JFK 50-mile Memorial. And we shortened it up, call it JFK 50 Mile, but that's the name of the event, the John F. Kennedy 50-mile Memorial. So it's an amazing event. And it's not just a running event. It really is like, it goes outside that, you know, almost like the human spirit. Like Kennedy wasn't like, hey, we want to win the medal race at the 64 Olympics. That wasn't his goal. His goal was to get his military sharp and to get the American public back on a track for fitness again. That was his vision of that. And I would think, you know, there's times I think, and I've talked to people in the Kennedy family, and they really appreciate what we do. We've kept his vision and his dream alive. And yeah, we feel real proud about that. And there's a great sense of responsibility because, like any race director will tell you, there's times you just want to go, that's it. It's not worth it. It's too much on my family. It's too much stress on my outside interests. It's just too much. I remember telling somebody one time, I said, I don't know how many years this is going to take off my life. You know, you sometimes wonder, is it worth it? You know, the stress involved with putting something like this on. But then you start thinking about it. And when you see those people crossing that finish line, it's worth it. You know, I'm a big bicycle racing fan. And there's this old myth that bicycle racing, a grand tour, if you do a grand tour, every grand tour that you do, these 21 stages over 23 days, there's like an old wise tale or old myth that for every grand tour you do, it takes a year off your life. So a pro bike racer eats and does, you know, 15 grand tours over his career. Well, you ain't living to 85, buddy. But if you ask any of those guys who wins a grand tour, or was it worth it? Yeah, I'd give those 15 years up anytime. And you know, I feel pretty good, my health and stuff like that. But if somebody would say you realize race directing the JFK for 30 or 40 years is not going to lead to you, you know, making your 90th year, your 100th year, I'm okay with that because let me tell you, the stories and the drama, the human drama that you see out there, and the husband and wives, and the fathers and sons, and we've had you know, grandfathers, fathers, and then their children doing the event. Now it's 62 years. We've had multiple generations, getting to almost the fourth generation, and gosh, it's bigger than sports. It's bigger than sports. You know, it's like Kennedy's dream. Living a life of vigor. Mark Cucuzella. I love Mark so much. I helped Mark put his events on, and he helps put my events on. We have this great partnership. He was actually my physician for a long period of time. And if I don't look too healthy, don't blame Mark. Okay.
Well, you can always go back to see Dr. Mark. But Mark likes to say this thing. He imitates Kennedy so well. So I'm going to do it good. But Mark would say, Kennedy say, live a life of vigor. But the way Kennedy said it, like my accent. And Mark does it perfect. You know, Mark's like, Kennedy wants us to live a life of vigor, a vigorous life, you know, and live life with energy. Don't lay on a couch with a remote. You know, get up, challenge yourself. The Freedom's Run Marathon or the JFK. And I have to agree with him with that. You know, I just love it when I see people, and we don't get many local people. There's probably 50 or 75 tri-state area people that do the JFK, but they proudly wear that JFK shirt when they're out training. And I love it when you see them. I saw one just the Labor Day morning. I was with my college guys riding my bike along with the college guys I coach. And we saw a group of people, and I know they were training for the JFK. And I said to the guys, you notice the shirts? They said, yeah, JFK shirts, you know? And it's great stuff.
Well, I noticed Todd has a really nice coat. So
yeah.
Yes, my JFK coat. Yep. I got that last year from Brooks Running, and that Ultra's sponsoring it this year. We love Ultras. Like, we wear Ultras all the time. So we're going to be down there loading up with all kinds of JFK and Ultra merch for sure. But you talked about this.
Talk about Ultra, what they're doing. They're going to have it live streamed. They're going to show the thing from start to finish, from the first finishers to the last finishers. We are so excited about it. When Ultra, when we came back on board with them, it was like, when they talk about this, you're like, you got to be kidding. So people all over the world can be sitting there on their laptop watching the JFK as it happens. And I can only imagine that somebody down in Australia is going to go next year. And I can tell you, November 22nd, 2025, we already, as we're planning the 62nd, the 63rd is already in the planning as well. So, hopefully this live stream will, inspire the world to come in, And you know what? And we're not Boston. We're not Boston. We're not New York. We're not Chicago. We're not that 30 or 40 or 50,000. But it's 1,200 people. And it's, you know what it's like. Todd, you know what it's like. When you're standing down there in Boonesboro, and it's only those 2 little lanes. When they built that town of Boonesboro, they didn't build it for automobiles. They built it for covered wagons going through there. And everybody's jammed in there. 1,200 looks like a lot. And the drone shots are just out of this world. And, Ken Racine, our timer, starts counting it down. 10 seconds. Man, it's just...
When you hear special. 10 seconds, you start thinking to yourself, what the heck am I going to be doing today? This is way too much to even... Like the key for me, Mike, was to trick the brain. I never thought. I tried to get the brain not to think what I was going to do. Keep the brain dumb, distracted, and off I went. But you know what? Like the live stream is going to be excellent because for the folks listening to the podcast and who haven't been to Maryland and West Virginia, it's beautiful. Like the towns are beautiful. There's so much like history. I love the architecture. My wife loves the architecture. She spent the entire day looking at different houses and getting all kinds of designs. I'm like, you got to come help me, support me on the course. But she did a great job. The Appalachian Trail is dynamite. And I had a couple of questions for you because I think last year Caleb Neff ran like maybe 5:30. I think he won, correct? How do you run the Appalachian Trail? How do you run it? Like it's those razorback rocks. What did you do?
Well, anyway, when those world-class runners in their 20s and 30s, and we had a guy win the race, Jim Hage, who was a 2:15 marathon runner. He won the race in 2002 when he was 44 years old. And he was still like in 2:30 marathon shape. He wasn't 2:15. But to watch those guys and gals, they almost dance across those rocks.
They dance.
Their feet are almost like American football, Canadian football too. They're like the running backs. They can almost feel with their feet. And I was there, and I was not that good. I wasn't a trail guy. I was a track guy. I ran the steeplechase, and that helped me. By running the steeplechase and track in college, that helped me with the JFK. But my coach was brilliant. And he was like, run behind the elite guys. The favorite in 1982 was Bill Lauder from New Jersey. And he said, just follow Bill. And here was my country boy logic that my coach gave me was, follow Bill Lauder, who was a very good trail runner. And if Bill puts his foot someplace and doesn't fall down, you put your foot there. Now, if Bill puts his foot there and falls down, don't put your foot there. And that was the logic. So you'll see people who are really good trail runners. Walmsley was a great trail runner. Some of these guys, you just can't, when you see the videos of them dancing from rock to rock and coming down Weaverton Cliffs from 14.5 miles, from 14 to 15 miles, you drop 1,000 feet. You climb 1,000 feet plus in the first 5.5 miles. You lose all of that 1,000 feet in less than 1 mile. And you watch most people will grab trees and take their time. But the leaders will just run down like water going down a water field. And it's just, I'm not taking it away from them, but youth helps. I heard recently, somebody says, if you want to avoid injury, be a 28-year-old. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's the people. And then like with Maria's group, with the people who finish in the 13th hour, they're a lot more cautious. They're holding on to the trees. They're working together in groups. And that way, if you stumble, you kind of stumble onto somebody instead of stumbling onto the rocks. So I really encourage people to, when I coach them or advise them, is to stay in groups, and not so much in a spread out group, but almost like in a Congo line. I've heard it described like that. It's a 1,000-person plus Congo line where people.
I was in the Congo line.
Yeah, and you kind of watch the person in front of you, and if they're successful and they stay upright, then you know to put your feet where they did, and if they stumble and go down, then obviously put your foot someplace else. So, of course, that doesn't work for everybody. There's going to be gaps in it, but it's just amazing when you guys. When I won the event in 1982, I was 2 hours and 6 minutes at the aid station that put you onto the towpath at 15.5 miles. These guys are 155, 154 for 15 and a half miles of climbing 1,000+ feet in the first 5.5 miles of the event itself. We should just have a finish line there, 5.5 miles uphill, break the tape. That's enough. We'll bust you some. And, we kind of laugh about it. We go, here, the good news and bad news is. The good news is that's the highest point in elevation is 5.5 miles. So it's technically all downhill from here. The bad news is it's 44.7 miles ago, and your calves are already on fire from running uphill for most people an hour plus already. So, but I tell people who are doing the event, it doesn't hurt to recon. You don't have to come in from half a world away to see the JFK course. But it does, if you're close enough to be within a few hours and you can come and do a recon hike, jog of the Appalachian Trail and see it, it isn't nearly as intimidating as it. Now, for the trail people, it's a piece of cake. I've heard trail people who do hard rock and stuff like that, and Western States and Leadville, that the JFK trail section is not that difficult. But for the road people, it is. It's quite an abrupt change. And it's helpful to see it. And even sometimes get online and see what's on YouTube and see a video of it to give you an idea. And, it's worth checking into. But, we have some injuries up there. We have some people stumble. And, one of the more common things is people who get their teeth knocked out because they're not trail people. They stumble, don't get their hands out quick enough, and they break a tooth or they break a finger, that type of thing. And I don't want to scare anybody away, but it's just, the good thing about for the people transitioning from a road and transitioning to their first ultra, all the difficult terrain is in the first 15.5 miles.
That's right.
And then, I tell people, unless you're the leaders, you're not going to win the race. Take advantage of the gracious time cutoffs. We allow for people to negative split. We allow people to go cautiously across the mountains and then gradually pick the pace up and beat the 13 hours, 12 hours, what they're going for. So we always kind of encourage people, don't try to be too aggressive in those first 15.5 miles. Kind of enjoy it. To the citizen runners that I coach, to the elite athletes, you got to be you got to race all the 50 miles. But for the citizen runners that I'm in there that really want to have a great experience, come through, get that coveted medal, is treat the first 15.5 miles almost like a warm-up, because you're going to warm up for 15.5 miles. And then once you get down the towpath, it's distance from there. It's a flat dirt path. And the last 8.4 miles have a couple little rollers to it, but footing's not a problem. So, and you got daylight. Besides the first, you start at 6:30, and by the time, you get onto most people, by the time they get onto the trail at 2.5 miles at 12-minute pace, it's light. It starts getting light about 15 minutes, 18 minutes after the gun goes off, depending on which date we are. The race starts as late as the 23rd of November and as early as the 17th, depending on how the calendar rotates. But, and you were talking earlier about your brain. And when I get people, we get the JFK is bright people, the overachievers. But sometimes that can be a negative because the logical part of your brain, especially for a person who's doing their first race past 26 miles, when they get to the 27-mile aid station, Appalachian under legs, and they're like, their brain's already telling them, that's far enough. You've gone far enough. That's a good day. Get into the car that your wife's driving or your husband's driving or whatever, or get into the DNF van and get out of here. And you have to be able to, for a short period of time, a really group of intelligent people have to override the logic in their brain. And I've had some athletes that I've coached that were in an incredible condition, but they were like borderline geniuses that DNF'd. They couldn't turn off that logical part of the brain, not for days, for a few hours. And my youngest son was one of those guys. My youngest son was a brilliant student. And just out of curiosity, he looked around. He says, well, my older brothers finished the race. My mom and my dad have finished the race. The cat can't do the race. So
I thought there's a story with the cat there for a second.
Well, I'll give the cat a talk later. But my son, Jimmy, I sat down, and he's in the leader's truck right before the gun's going to go off. And he did the training. But it was still, I told him, I said, Jimmy, I'm not going to sugarcoat you. This is going to be the most difficult day of your life. And your brain, at some point between 20 couple of miles, and by the time you get to 38, all of a sudden you can kind of see I'm swimming for the shore, and I can see the shore.
That's right.
12 miles.
You can smell the bar. Yep.
2-mile aid station and 38. It's hard your brain sometimes going, oh my goodness. So I told Jimmy, I said, it's going to be the most difficult. I said, but just telling yourself, the bed that you woke up in this morning, you were going to sleep in that bed again tonight. It's a 13-hour time limit. You're going to weather the storm. You're going to get there. And he did. And he finished with just like less than a half hour. And it was just, he wasn't a runner, but he answered the challenge and he got it. But a couple of days later, he said, Dad, you lied to me. I said, no, what did I lie to you? He said, you said that I would end up in my bed when the day was over. He was so sore that me and my wife had to carry him into the house. I put him into my easy chair. We fed him some Chinese food. We threw a blanket on him, pulled off his shoes, and that's where he slept. He says, I never made my He's got, he's got this incredible memory. And like anybody who crosses the finish line says, never again. A couple weeks later, they start thinking, if I chained a little different, if I fueled a little different, maybe I started doing, people start thinking, especially younger people, especially people, before their 50th or 60th birthday, they start thinking, I could have done a little different. I could have done it faster and it wouldn't have been as difficult. And they're back. And then we have people finish the race 10 times. We make a big deal about this. The 500
I noticed
mile
that. I noticed the mile clubs.
And one of the guys I coach, he's 79 years old. He finished the thing 35 straight years. From his late 30s to his early 70s. And then at that point, 35 finishes in a row. I said, Paul Bector's his name. I said, Paul, probably a good time for you to help out with an aid station, become a race management now. 35 straight finishes between.
Yeah, he earned it. He earned it.
1982 and 2016, I believe that was his 35 years. And he's like, yeah, that's it. That's perfect record. But it's crazy. There's a guy that's finished it well into 20. He's over 25 finishers, and I know he's not 45 years of age yet. He started doing the race when he was a college student. And he's got his you're talking about goals, long-term goals. Kimball Byron finished the race 49 times before he retired. And so we got, Brad Distad is in there, and Brad's focused on that. And I mean, it's not like the guy's a full-time runner. He's a teacher full-time. He's got a bunch of kids and raising a family and doing all kinds of, but he's like, there he is. Because if I do this right, and I forget what the year is, 2048, and I'm going to be breaking Kimball Byron's record. And it's just so cool,
Wow.
People who set those, like Eric Senseman to win the JFK. He didn't say I'm going to finish the JFK 49 times. It's going to take me 5 decades of, of missing whatever it is on that weekend. And stuff's going to come up. Yeah. I mean, nobody likes to talk about mortality, but funerals and weddings, they're going to come up. And your kid's going to make the state soccer tournament championship. And what are you going to do? Are you going to do the JFK? Are you going to go to the state championships on that day? But these people, they're amazing. That these streakers, as we call them, and then these people who join these clubs. And when you finish for the 30th time, we've only handed out, I think, 12 of them. These amazing $500 jackets that say JFK 1500 mile club. You can't buy those. That's going to take you at least 3 decades to earn, and a lot of lost toenails, and probably a lot of discussions with your spouse on why you're doing this.
Absolutely.
What's the old phrase? Been there, done that. Well, the people who do the thing 10, 15, 20, 25 times, they don't have that. None of that. Been there, done that. It's like, I'm going to been there, done that. I'm going to do it again. So we're 79 days, and I can almost count down the hours until I take the same
fire it off. Yeah.
The same starter's pistol that Buzz Sawyer used and took meticulous care of. We only use it 1 day a year now. We haven't had a starter's pistol for our all-comers track meets. We saved the Buzz Sawyer pistol. We'll clean that one up, well oil in it, and pow, it'll go at 6:30:00 East Coast time, AM, 0630 military time. And we're excited about it.
Oh, my!
And how many people are you anticipating this year? You mentioned 1,200 is where it's kind of gotten to.
Our permit allows us 1,200.
Okay, gotcha.
And my wife and race management's changed quite a bit with wave starts and that kind of thing. And my wife is really a genius, and she's not in the room right now, so I'm going to brag about her because she really is very modest. But she was on the U.S. national team. She was an Olympic trials qualifier. She was a pro that ran for Reebok 10 years after college. A sponsor pro, raced all over the world. I used to drive her to the airport. She'd race over some foreign country. I'd pick her up at the airport. And then when she got into race administration, she's really got a very good feel for the sport. And we're sitting around, and like I said, we have this very interesting, when we're sitting around a table, you've got people who are 40 years apart in age sometimes in different perspectives. And Maria was like, we don't want to get too big. We want to have that nice JFK experience. And I was actually in the race before the Park Service was capping what we could put in there. Buzz Sawyer started 1,724 people back in 1973. And I do remember it was a little too congested at some portions on the Appalachian Trail. It was a little too much. And Maria, as one of the participants, we felt as though 1,200 starters was kind of the sweet spot. It makes it look massive down there at the start, yet it's a very manageable number, and it's not an uncomfortable number for those people up on the Appalachian Trail. And once you get down a towpath, things spread out. But, so that's where we're at. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to change. I do things a little different than Buzz Sawyer did, and he totally respected that and honored that. And I tell the people on the race staff, when I'm no longer on the staff, if you guys all get together and decide to do things slightly different, I fully understand that. If things didn't evolve, the Boston Marathon would have probably died, because they had to roll and change with the times. And, even Buzz, when Buzz was the director, he didn't have aid stations. You were dependent. Part of the race was that you had to have a handler, kind of like a boxer needed to have a cut man in the corner. You couldn't win that race unless you had a cut man, a good handler who knew how to do things, who knew how to pass you the right drink at the right time at the right place. And that was kind of fun. And the JFK was like that. It was almost like NASCAR. It was like, who's going to do what? And you almost looked around. And I was like very innovative. I took old cups from fast food places and kept the cup with the plastic lid and the straw. Where everybody was spilling drinks all over themselves, my coach was putting my drinks inside one of those fast food cups. And then I had my drink. I could drink it out of the straw. So, hey, this guy's a freaking genius. I said, it was fun at that. But when I took over with Buzz, I said, Buzz, and he knew it. I said, I want to bring in standardized aid stations. So that guy who comes in from California that can't afford to bring a handler with them, he has an even playing field, that he gets the same course aid as the guy who is able to show up with his wife, or the gal who shows up with her husband, or your coach, or whatever. And there were some people that didn't like that, because it was after 30 years. There was people like, you changed the flavor of the event. But I thought I made it better. I thought I made it fair. And as time went on, I think more people agreed than not. But we don't turn away handlers, because that's a blast. Yep. The handlers have so much fun. It's like a Woodstock for them. They go to the spots, and everyone's there, that rooting for their person to do well, and they take their job very important. And it is important, because I can't give you a pair of shoes at every aid station, but a handler can give you a dry pair of shoes and dry socks if it's a rainy day, that type of thing. So it can make a difference. So we don't discourage them. In fact, we encourage them to come in handlers and have fun with it for the day.
And the aid stations are amazing. Like I was so impressed at how well they were organized, run, the selection, the handlers, the volunteers. Mike, it was fantastic. There's one that handed out like these homemade cookies, like really delicately decorated. I think at mile 17 or 18. Oh, it was fantastic. And
Frederick Steeplechasers Running Club. And they even their JFK 50 mile cookies. They're amazing. They're a running club from the next county over. And actually, there's a small little part of the course that goes through. Appalachian Trail dips into Frederick County for a little bit. But those aid stations, they take such great pride in that. Because most of them have they either did the event at one point in their career, and they pride themselves at. There's the statistic that we have every year. The normal finishing rate is somewhere around 92, 93%. But they think, hey, if we do a better job, if we keep these people properly fueled and properly energized, maybe we can bump that up to 94%. So those people at the aid station, when the stats come in that we had 94% finish, it's like they won the Super Bowl. They're so into it. It's amazing. And
that's interesting. Most
races have the race, if you go into race management school, they will tell you the main reason most races die is they can't get enough volunteers to sustain the event. At the JFK, we don't have that problem. People come in, and we even tell the participants, when you no longer can beat the 13 hours, or when you get that 10th finish, and that's it. That's what I wanted. I wanted that, don't go away. Come back. Be part of the party, just in a different role. And it's a blast. I mean, I haven't been on the starting line as a participant in 34 years yet. Man, I can't wait for JFK weekend. Cannot wait to see what great story is going to unfold. And that energy is at all those aid stations. And it's just priceless. I mean, you sometimes people are like, the race director saying, how do you get that? How you like, I don't know. It's almost like, how did you fall in love with your wife? You bumped into him, and all of a sudden, you just feel the magic. And and I think it's the same way with JFK. A lot of people just, I'll do that when I heard it was on my bucket list. I'll go ahead and do the JFK. I'm trying to knock all 50 states. And all of a sudden, they find themselves back here. There's just something special about it. And I'm not trying to put down any other race, because I felt that same magic at the Boston Marathon. I dreamed about it. I read about it in Sports Illustrated when I was in the seventh grade, sitting there in the school library. And when I finally made the starting line, when I was 20 years old, and the helicopters are above, it was everything I had dreamed it would be and more. And I bring back athletes back there every year, for that same magic, even though I haven't been on the starting line since 1998. But the JFK has that same type of flavor. It's like, and there was a writer one time, I think it might have been Phil Jackman from the Baltimore Sun, and he wrote that there's a sense at the JFK starting line that nothing else in the entire world is going on that day. If this is the only thing happening. And we know that's not right. There's football going on all over the place, and NBA basketball and all kinds of stuff going on, and a ton of other foot races going on. But there's that certain atmosphere at the JFK that it just grabs you.
I'm totally with you. The bug bit me, Mike, and I love the stat about the aid stations trying to bump up the finisher rate. There's a guy on the course who has the ghetto blaster and the speaker, and he's riding his bike. He saved my life because I was kind of like catching him. He'd pass me, but he was riding really slow and he's playing nice music out in the course, and it was awesome because it got your mind off the towpath for a little bit. Yeah, but it was great. Whoever that gentleman was with the radio, I'm looking for you this year.
He comes back every year. He dresses like a superhero.
Yes,
and I get a story every year about somebody. I was stopping the next aid station. And he comes by, and all of a sudden, it's like you feel like Rocky Balboa. You think you're done, but you got one more round in you. Now, he's incredible. And now he's like, and we don't have to tell him. He just that's his year. I don't know what he does the other 364 days a year. Last year was 365 with the leap year. Or no, this year we have the leap year. But it's amazing, and people look forward to that, Yeah, they just like it's always darkest before the dawn, and those little things that are gonna pump you up. At the 38-mile aid station, they hand out red velvet cake. And when I was telling you that thing in your mind between 22 and 38, and you get to 38, they give you a little piece of red velvet cake, and you're like, I'm good to go for the last 12 months.
And a little bit of Coca-Cola.
What other race do they give you? And I don't know what the nutritional value of a red velvet cake is. Probably not much, but it's like
we'd have to ask Dr. Mark about that.
We'll bring him back.
Tim and Lisa Buzzard ran that aid station for over 25 years, and that was their thing. And then the people who took over after them said, we got to keep it going. And I know the people who take over the aid station after them, like I said, November of 2062, I fully expect that they're still going to be giving out red velvet cake at 38 miles. And it's almost like, okay, I get my red velvet cake. Now, if I could keep it going for another 12 miles, I get that beautiful medal, and it's, that's great. The guys who do the finish line with me, fell in love with the event. They announced bicycle races, and I would go, and they were awesome. They kept races entertaining for hours. And I go, these guys would be great at a running race. So they came in and they adopted the event. Two of the guys aren't ultra marathoners. They just said, I got to do it. The one guy at age 50, I got to do it. So he went out there and he finished the thing with like 30 seconds to spare on the time clock. And whenever I see these guys, they're the same way. They can't wait to announce it. And we had a sponsor this past year who always came out and watched the event, watch the leaders come in, stick around for maybe the top 50 or so, and then pack up and leave. And I begged him this year. I said, listen, Justin, stick around, watch the last hour. Watch the last hour. Even if you got to go and then come back. So he stuck around the whole time. And I watched his eyes. He'd been around the race for years. And I watched his eyes. He said, that was just magical. You know, it gave you just such hope for our species to watch those people helping each other, and people who had no business physically doing what they just did, covering 50 miles of challenging terrain in less than 13 hours. And he was just so awe-inspired by it. And I said, what did I tell you? Did I tell you that, you know, I've never seen anybody stick around for that last hour, no matter how hard their heart is or how silly they think distance running is, that they aren't just affected by it. It's just,
Absolutely.
It's a long day. I mean, we're up setting up at like 4 a.m. and that kind of stuff. And the last hour is from 6:30 to 7:30. And then we still have a lot of cleanup and stuff to do after that. But it's like that last hour is just like, if you need something to fire you up, life just seems like it's kicking you in the butt and it's not worth living. Man, you come for that last hour, you're like, holy moly, man, you're just rejuvenated. It gives you hope for our species.
Hope for our species. You're bang on. We couldn't agree more. You called it accept the challenge, and Mike, absolutely. You know, do big things. Do something that scares you. You know, and like you said, it's helping each other out there. That's what I took away the most. The aid station workers helping out, the volunteers helping out, and the runners helping themselves out. Your energy. It comes across so clear, your passion and energy and the love that you have for this event. And you know what, you touched on it. If you don't run it, volunteer. And you know what better way to give back to the running community and to your fellow runners and fellow humans to volunteer, help out. And that's amazing.
And I volunteer at as much as I can. Kennedy was big into the volunteer thing and the Peace Corps and also hard things. You know, January 20th, 1961, he says, we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him home safely again before the end of this decade. We're like, what crazy movie are you watching? Of course,
that's right.
He didn't live to see it, but it happened. Doing things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And the athletes I coach sometimes, they love to quote me. And one of my quotes is, God, this is hard, Coach. It's hard. And I said, it's the hard that makes it special. And it's the hard of the JFK that makes it special. That's why it's special. If it wasn't hard, it wouldn't be special. And, you know, it's just magical. I mean, I just hope that my kids, you know, are doing it and that, you know, it's there and it kind of gives you hope. Right now, we're having our country's kind of divided in this latest political cycle, you know, and it's like an event like this can bring you back together. You know, it's like nobody cares who you're voting for on November 5th. On November 23rd, I'm going to help you across the Appalachian Trail. Mm-hmm. You're going to help me. I got to tell you, somebody says, tell me what was your most special moment ever with JFK? Less than a decade ago, I'm at the finish line, and a guy crosses the finish line with a titanium artificial leg all the way up to his hip. And the first thing I think to myself, we've never had someone with a full artificial leg. We'd had people below the knee, but never a full titanium leg. And I thought to myself, how did he get down Weaverton Cliffs? Yeah, how did he possibly get down Weaverton Cliffs? And I tried to do it in a nice way, whatever. I went up to him, introduced who I was, and I said, I really don't know how to word this, so I'm just going to ask you, how did you get down Weaverton Cliffs? And his face just lit up. And he really didn't know how challenging Weaverton Cliffs was until he got there and looked at it. And the people around him saw his dilemma. And people he did not know got in front of him and behind him, and they helped him come down that trail one step at a time, gave up probably 10 or 12 minutes off their time to help this guy. And then once he got down there in the towpath and he was back to be able to do it, he was able to go on his own. And I said, who are the people? He said, I don't know. These people just rallied to him to help him do this. Adam Popp is his name. He's come back to the event almost every year. He does Ironman triathlons. He won his division at the Boston Marathon. This guy's approaching 3 hours in the marathon. And he lost his leg in service of his country. And one of the reasons my son is serving in the Air Force is that he was motivated by Adam Popp. And I thought to myself, I mean, I'd seen a lot of stuff. I'd seen some heavy people or guys that looked like they should be playing interior line for a football team, not doing the JFK. But I'll never get that image out of my mind of this guy doing this. And the people he's motivated and inspired by that. We had him come back as the guest speaker a few years later. And it's like, and he's actually setting PRs with a titanium leg faster than he ran when he had what God gave him. And you know, just incredible stories like that. You know, and you know, every time you think you've seen it all, you haven't. You know, you haven't. You know, last year the 3 gals, and one of them turned 70. She's one of our former winners, Carolyn Showalter, and she's still out there. She used to do the event in 7 hours, and now she's trying to beat that 13 hours. She just turned 70. And most people, especially, you know, women are funny with their age, and they're dreading getting older. I saw on her 70th birthday, she was pumped because she's coming into the JFK trying to break the women's 70 and over records, you know, and that people putting a positive spin on stuff, you know, and yeah, we can't wait.
What a great
79 and a half.
That is awesome. Wow. I mean, between the cake, the cookies, your passion, I mean, the sights, the sounds, the stories, it's just, there's so many things about this race that obviously make it different than any other one that's out there. So we really appreciate, Mike, you coming on today and sharing with us your experience and everything that you've seen. And it's you know, ignited some passion in me as well to at least see it at some point in time, because I know Todd said nothing but great things about it. And I hope, if anything, that this podcast today, you know, ignite something in the listeners to, you know, consider it, to go down there, be, you know, part of Team Canada going down, or wherever you're listening to this podcast and going down.
I'm going to bring Mike a
participating
6-pack of beer. That's what I'll bring Mike a nice Canadian
Don't
6-pack
bring a
of
skid.
beer.
Don't bring a skid. I'm trying to live a healthy life. I exercise every day, and you know, when life is worth living, it motivates you to train. Okay, so you know, I exercise every day because I want to direct for longer. I want to coach for longer. I really like what I do.
Yeah.
People are like, "Don't you want to retire?" No, because I really like what I do. You know, so Todd can tell you, Mark. When you get that medal and you're going around in the school and you're seeing those other people, those medals, it is all of a sudden, I don't know how big your family, you all of a sudden you're part of a bigger family. And I can only imagine when you cross the border going back into Canada, when they ask you, are you bringing anything back? That's a show. Yeah, I'm bringing this back. I'm bringing this baby back right here.
No kidding.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic feeling. Mike, thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for the many years of putting on this race. We'd love to have you back on in the future, but I'll see you in November 23rd, 2024 down in Boonesboro.
Lord willing, I'll be there. But if I'm not, the race will still go on. And Buzz Sawyer, God rest his soul, Buzz passed away when he was almost 91 in 2019. And in his later years, I said he never had any children, but I felt as though I was his son, even though I didn't. And one of the greatest things people ever call, his nickname was Buzz. And people for a while, when I really got into coaching, they would call me Little Buzz. Buzz. And I was like, is there a greater compliment? But he took me over the side one time, and he was really teary-eyed. And his health was starting to fade, and he was in his 80s. And he says, the smartest decision I ever made in my life was having you take over. And I'm telling you, you know, I think of some of the stuff that my mother said to me that made me cry, that my wife said to me, and cry in a good way. And it was just, it almost made my life worth, that I was here for a purpose, that he could turn to me and that I would keep it going. And I had that same feeling. We talk about it. You know, guys, I ride my bicycle for exercise. If I'm killed in a bicycle accident, I mean, yeah, you know, you might have a memorial service, whatever you want to do, but don't stop the race. Even if it happens the day before the race has got to go on. Buzz had that. You know, I want that. And I feel very, very confident that this is going to see a century plus. And, you know, and I don't know. You don't know until you get to the other side, but I'm hoping I can still see from the other side and see, you know, tap somebody saying, see that race that's celebrating the 300th year? I was directing it 200 years ago, you know, one of those deals. So. Guys, hey, listen, I appreciate you inviting me to come on. I do a bunch of these things, interviews and stuff, but it never gets old. It really doesn't. I mean, you know, it's We have a blast putting this race on. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of elbow grease. Tim Mason, who was a national champion for me, and got a full scholarship because of that. And he's 44 years old now. He turns 44 next week. And Tim said to me, he said, Coach, he said, I'll always help you because you helped me get my education paid for. And he has. He's been there for 20 plus years. And I mean, he gets dirty. He does hard work. I mean, he does things that Tim, you're 44. You can't be doing this stuff anymore. He said, no, I'm good. And then I'll sneak a 22-year-old in there working with and says, Tim, have this guy lift the 50-pound boxes, okay?
That's right. That's right.
That type of thing. But everybody really feels as though it's worthwhile. And when it's done, and we've been really blessed, and we've never had a fatality. And we know it's sooner or later, everybody has, the day they're going to pass. And that we're going to have but every year when the last person's off the course and we look around and go, that was great. It was unbelievable. Yep. But guys, I really appreciate you allowing me this time.
Oh.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
And we thank you for joining us and being a renegade. You can watch the video of our podcasts on YouTube or Spotify, and we'd appreciate subscribing to our channels. You can find us on Instagram at UltraMarathonMan and at Runkle Mark. And join our Facebook community, the RUNEGADE Podcast. Or simply email us. We'd love to hear from you. RUNEGADE podcast@gmail.com. We thank you again for listening and watching. And in a world of runners, be a renegade.